Hi, everyone. I think we'll get started. Welcome to our next panel. This one is on urban mobility. So we're going from AI to really the physical world. And, to begin, I believe in mobility as a human right, and it's something that is part of the fabric of all our lives. It's how we got here today, except for those that are remote. Let me introduce myself. I'm a professor in computer science. I'm the associate director of the Pacific Northwest Transportation Consortium. I'm also an associate director since its founding of Create. I'm the co-founder of Project Sidewalk. And I'm a former high school thespian, mediocre musician, lifelong, and a failed basketball player. So I'm delighted to welcome you all to this fantastic panel. We bring together people working across very different scales of mobility, from airline advisory boards to sidewalk data to state-level policy for non-drivers. We have one panelist who will be joining us remotely. But let me begin by introducing Kenny Salvino, here on my far right. Salvini, sorry.
Close enough.
Is that Italian?
Sorta?
Yeah. You'll have to tell us.
Oh, yeah.
Who's a regular contributor to New Mobility magazine. He's at the Here and Now project, an advisor to Alaska Airlines and Amtrak. I think there's an interesting story there. Then we also have Kunal Mehta, who's from the Taskar Center for Accessible Technology. And then hopefully Anna Ziverts will be here. And she started the Non-Drivers Alliance. She also has a book that I have on my shelf, which is quite enjoyable. It's called When Driving is Not an Option, Steering Away from Car Dependency. So rethinking a society that doesn't depend on cars as its primary mode of transport. And she also previously led the Disability Mobility Initiative at Disability Rights Washington. So I want to begin with introductions. We'll go with who you are, what you work on, and then the most important one, your worst personal travel or transit story. So we'll begin with Kenny.
Yeah, Kenny Salvini. I co-founded the Here and Now project. We support people with spinal cord injuries and other mobility disabilities. It's all about connecting people that are newly injured or just moving through the world differently and kind of crowdsourcing ideas. I was paralyzed in a snow skiing accident 22 years ago and got sent home with very few resources for how to do life in the here and now. And for me, the most tangible solutions came from other wheelchair users and folks with disabilities. And so, yeah, we support people all over Western Washington, and we're getting roots spread out into Eastern Washington as well. Worst travel story, 2016, I booked a flight to New York City as part of a 2-week trip to the East Coast for the role on Capitol Hill with United Spinal. When I landed in Newark, my chair was destroyed so badly I didn't have it for 11 of the 14 days I was on the East Coast. I spent 5 days in a hand-controlled chair, which I drive this one with my head. So my family and caregivers had to drive me all over Manhattan until I got my chair back for one day. And I got on the train from New York to Philadelphia and heard sparks under my chair and spent another 6 days in a manual chair. So that all happened, and then that was thanks to United Airlines. And a year later, Alaska Airlines destroyed my chair on the way back from the same event. So that gave me a whole new platform of air travel accessibility. Thankfully, Alaska Airlines' response was far better than United's. They brought me in-house and made it a teachable moment. And so now, like John said, I'm on the advisory board for disabilities for Alaska Airlines and do a handful of other things. So, yeah.
Thank you. My name is Kunal Mehta. I work at the Taskar Center as a UX designer. I do work on and do research and design on navigation applications, a little bit of sidewalks data, typically work at the intersection of story and data. Travel story, again, air travel. I was, about 2 years back, I was heading home for a vacation to India, and this was through Paris. reached Paris all right, and the was a change of, flight transfer, and the flight from Seattle to Paris was already running late, and there was it was very tight, the layover because of the delay. And now I get this person assisting me, doesn't speak English. I don't speak French. And I've been made to sit at another gate, and it was probably another terminal as well. And I'm sort of jumping and asking them, okay, can you take me quickly? Like, sit, don't worry. And I for that hour or so, I literally had nightmares. But luckily, just boarded the flight, so that turned out fine. Another story was about 2 months or 3 months back. I use paratransit, and I think it's pretty decent in general when I'm using it within King County, but there was this need to go to Everett, and what would be a 30-minute drive and maybe an hour-long bus trip became 2.5 hours to go, and the return trip was again 2 hours 45 minutes because of a transfer, inter-county transfer, where I was kind of sitting at their transit center within the vehicle, but for about an hour plus each way. So yeah, I guess those two stories don't leave me.
Thank you for sharing. And I do see we now have Anna. Anna, can you hear us?
I can. Can you hear me?
Yes. And you are...
I'm in the process of switching to my laptop. I'm so sorry.
good.
I can share a travel story right now. I am in Kittitas, Washington, and I thought for sure there'd be cell phone service here. And there is not. And so I was frantically trying to find somewhere with Wi-Fi, and I found a lovely coffee shop that is still open. So very, very grateful. And I'll be switching to my laptop in just a minute so I can see you all, and I'm a bit less wiggly. But yeah, I travel stories. So I'm low vision. I don't drive. And I am on a bike bus trip with a friend right now who also doesn't drive, and so a lot of trying to figure out connections and things, and not always knowing, what road conditions or trail conditions are going to be like, what bus connections are going to be like, and where there's going to be internet or not internet, or cell phone service or not cell phone service. We've become, I know I've become so reliant on just being able to pull out my phone and look up directions no matter where I am, and if that's not available, that can be a real challenge. So sorry for being a little late, but I'm here now.
And we're glad to have you. Thank you so much. And you're probably about 10 feet in size, so welcome.
Lovely.
And my first question is to you. So if you have to transition to your laptop at some point, please just let us know. We'll go with Anna, and then the rest of you can fill in as well. So for this first question, when most people think about mobility and disability, they might picture paratransit or wheelchair ramps or tactile surface indicators or curb cuts. But what are the barriers that you think are still largely invisible in public discourse?
Ooh, that is a good question. I mean, as someone who grew up not able to drive, that's sort of the lens at which I view the world. And so I think there's lots of barriers, and I think everyone, especially people with disabilities, each of our disabilities is unique, right? And the access needs we have are often, different in fun ways. And so we each come to this, to navigating the world and, finding barriers that are unique to us and being super frustrated at those. I think for me, it was tricky. I grew up very much, trying to pretend that I didn't have a disability. Obviously, a lot of shame and stigma around that, being a child of, before the ADA, and not really being well connected into, knowing other disabled folks as role models ever. And so not feeling like, and then as I became a little older and started to recognize the disability community was out there, and the blind community was out there, really struggling to find a place in that community, and sort of being in this liminal space between not blind fully. Like I have, quite a lot of sight, but definitely not normal sight, and definitely not enough sight to drive. And so when our entire sort of built environment and transportation system is built around car access being the predominant mode of transportation, really struggling with that. And so that's the frame at which I enter this work with is, in communities that we've built around car access, how can how do you get around that when you are not able to access driving?
Great. Thank you. Kunal, we'll go with you.
Yeah. I guess from my perspective, there's not enough consideration or not enough thought given to the cognitive burden one experiences taking a trip. So I'm blind, and no matter how many tools are given to me, how much technology I have, definitely takes more effort and more cost in terms of time to to get from place X to Y, and that is not necessarily a part of the discourse that most transit planners or agencies have. And I spoke about paratransit being my one of my worst travel stories, but I'm still an avid paratransit user because it allows me the flexibility to kind of relax in cognitively. There's I can do some things, do whatever I need to on my phone, on my computer, whatever on the ride, although it might take longer because the uncertainty is always still there, no matter how easy it is to navigate or how much more technology or how well you are trained in terms of orientation and mobility. Things get better, things get quicker as you practice, but I don't think the cognitive load living with blindness and navigating, at least as of now, has come to a point where it's nullified. So yeah.
Kenny, we're going to get to you in a second, but I do have a quick follow-up question because I think that's a really good consideration for those that work in human-computer interaction and designing these navigation tools. So I thought, if you don't mind sharing, what kind of navigation apps do you use, like Blind Square, Voice Vista? Do you use the audio guide on Google Maps? And how do you find them?
Yeah, I kind of started using more, when I started navigating a little bit by myself, started with Google Maps. I use Access Map pretty often. The Access Map, the tool that we've built, which is based off the sidewalks data. I sometimes use this app called Oko, which kind of helps you read crossing signals, whether it's green or red. Voice Vista sometimes, or it used to be Soundscapes, for exploration, if I need to know what's around me. But the most reliable tool has been, human assisted tool where, I kind of still use Aira, which is a paid service, thanks to my work and thanks to me, I guess thanks to UW when I was a student as well, that I do get certain minutes of Aira use. It's essentially a human visual interpreter who kind of looks through your phone or your glasses and helps you navigate. But so that to me is still the most reliable way to navigate. And then just for transit, I use the Transit Go app to get a ticket sometimes if I need to. I use One Bus Away because I've heard quite a few times that Google Maps, and I've experienced it as well, that the bus sometimes isn't, the bus directions sometimes aren't very reliable. So that's the other bit. So yeah, it's and I guess not just me. I did a little research with few blind and low vision folks, and most of them have 4 to 6 apps in their toolkit, while they're trying to navigate.
Okay, quick trivia question. I just heard Kunal mention 3 navigation apps that have some history in their foundation at the University of Washington. Does anybody want to try this trivia? You don't have to say all 3. One Bus Away is the first one. Is it Steven? Thank you. We got one. Access Maps, which we'll probably hear more about, but that's 2. Does Ira? I don't know. You could check. That's not the one I was thinking. Somebody could Google it. Or DuckDuckGo it.
Or Claude it.
Or Claude it. We don't want to burn those LLM GPU cycles, though, for such a query. Come on, anybody? Soundscape at Microsoft. Alex Fiannaca was on that team, which was James Fogarty's student here. I think there's probably other types of intersections with UW, but that's pretty awesome impact, by the way. Okay, now Kenny, finally. Sorry.
So invisible barriers is what we're talking about. And, one of the things that wasn't visible to me because I entered the disability rights and accessibility space from a very privileged kind of level. I wasn't at the ground floor. I always say I kind of came through the penthouse when it comes to air travel accessibility because most people aren't getting, of my peers are not able to fly themselves. But, finding out that the ADA doesn't even include air travel was a pretty shocking thing for me. The fact that the Air Carrier Access Act predates it and basically nullified the inclusion of air travel within the ADA was kind of a big surprise to me. So finding that out and having to navigate the barriers that still exist for air travel has been a large one. So it's kind of a more macro thing, but.
As a follow-up to that, then, what do you think is driving companies like Alaska Airlines to have you on their advisory board? Or you mentioned Boeing is doing some nice innovation things related to disability as well.
Yeah, I mean, the disability community has been largely loyal to Alaska Airlines because they're a lot more forward-thinking. I think they're the first to establish a disability advisory board about 10 years ago. But I think the last panel we heard a lot about advocacy groups that get loud and noisy, and I think we made enough noise over the last decade to get noticed enough. That there was a few very visible articles and exposés on how much wheelchairs are damaged, and so that kind of brought things to the forefront. But yeah, now with disability being a little bit more in vogue, I guess, within most of these companies, like to have Alaska Airlines has a Office of Culture and Belonging that was part of the disability group that got built. And now you see within Boeing, they've got a whole accessibility wing that has people with disabilities. I know Anthony Anderson is one of their engineers that designs bathrooms. And Bill Harkness is the new head of accessibility, and they seem to be a little bit more forward thinking and not really getting ahead of things rather than being forced by legislation, which is encouraging to me to not have to go through the crowdsourcing and the pushing the legislators to make the change, but actually seeing the business case has been encouraging, at least a little bit.
Thank you. I think we'll stay on the topic of the Americans with Disabilities Act. So it's nearing its 40th birthday. Anna, we'll start with you again. So the ADA has been incredibly effective at forcing, baseline technical compliance. And I think maybe primarily a compliance-based perspective, and maybe one that sidelines other types of human values like recreation and pleasure. So it's less maybe effective at inspiring great new types of designs. So I wanted to just turn towards the ADA, and what do you see it in its future, particularly related to transportation?
Gosh, that's an interesting question. I mean, so I worked for a long time for Disability Rights Washington, and I am not an attorney, and so I learned very early on to preface all my remarks around the ADA with, I am not an attorney, and I don't come to this from a legal background. I also don't, coming to this work from a movement background, my background was in labor, organizing, before sort of working in the disability community. I also come to this with the feeling that the laws that we have and the way those laws are written and interpreted, the way the courts decide, what is the law, and what it means, that's all a political decision, right? And it all is based on the political power that movements build, and are able to achieve. And so I think what we have with the ADA was, because of the movement building and the organizing in the disability community among our elders who did that work. And we can't, just because it passed then, that was a moment in time and compromises were made. And we can't just rest on that, right? We need to continue to organize and build power among disabled people across communities, outside of just people who identify as disabled, but understanding where our access needs align with other communities as well. I feel like part of what's been challenging with movement building around disability is that in order, to have be protected, right, under the ADA, you have to argue that your disability makes you different and your needs are different from other people, right? And that's how you have legal protection, and that makes that sort of cross intersectional organizing more difficult, because I may need transit because I can't drive because of my disability, but other people may need transit because they can't afford a car or they don't have documentation. And if I'm trying to make a disability claim around that isn't, it doesn't cross those communities as easily, and it makes it more difficult to organize intersectionally. And so I'm not particularly excited about, thinking about sort of a rights-based framework for doing this work.
It's a great answer. Thank you. Kenny, we'll go with you. ADA and its future and its role.
Yeah, I think I echo everything that Anna said, just that, they start as individual movements. You think about the Rehab Act and the 504 sit-in, all these things that, predated the ADA. It's collective pressure and moving forward, but it is a challenge when just in my silo of an experience, my expertise is spinal cord injury because I literally fell into it 22 years ago. And so a frame of reference when it comes to the rest of, my brothers and sisters with different disabilities, it's been a steep learning curve for me, like getting on advisory boards and learning the needs of, the blind and low vision community, the deaf and hard of hearing. And then, recognizing that, I am one of the least marginalized people within a large marginalized subset. As a white, cisgendered male, I've only got, so many barriers in front of me. And so the recognition that there is a lot of, layers to this is a big challenge. But, if they were able to get these movements going in the, in the 70s, 80s, 90s, it's not something that should stop us now.
Great, thanks. Kunal, do you have anything to add, or?
I guess I would maybe say one thing, that hopefully ADA would not just look at individual attributes, where, okay, compliance, curb ramps, talking about crossing, sidewalks, but start thinking about people's journeys and representing, access to places as a bigger parameter. Is somebody able to access groceries, somebody able to access medical facilities or recreation, versus just, it being compliance where you're trying to fix a particular attribute or a group of attributes.
Yeah, I think that's really important to have that kind of more holistic perspective. I also want to encourage you all as audience members, both online and here physically present with us, to think of questions for this lovely panel. So I wanted to pause in case there was anything. I will provoke you. Greg has one. Let's go to the audience. Oh. I can bring in my mic, or I bet I could beat you. Look at that.
Enjoy that. Long legs.
Look, I was going to say, look at those legs. There's no way you can outrun him. We talked earlier about AI, and we can talk about AI and transportation. As you look forward, you both what you look forward to predicting happen and what would you like to see happen with regard to automated transportation. Would it be nice if there were just a constant flow of cars and you just walked out your door and it was like downtown New York? You just put your hand up and a automated car would pull over in front of you, pick you up, and take you wherever you wanted to go? Or do you see it being more go to the corner and get on a mass transit? I mean, what is it that you think would be sort of the ideal way to think about transportation in the future?
I love this question. It's like automated vehicles. You know, Greg, I think Anna came from the East Coast. They call those subways. Okay. Anna, I'm sure you have some thoughts on this, so why don't you share? We'll start with you.
Sure. Yeah. No. Definitely. I love that response, John, about subways. And I wish we were having more of a conversation in Seattle about reducing the cost for light rail by making more of our trains similar to the ones in Vancouver, BC, that are automatic, because it does make it possible to run higher frequency trains, which is, frequency is freedom. As far as autonomous cars, so I've ridden Waymos a couple times in the Phoenix area now, and I remember the first time I got in one, this was like a year and a half ago, maybe 2 years ago, I had this moment of like, wow, this is what it feels like, because it was the first time I'd ever been in a car by myself, and that was sort of the sense of, of freedom, I guess, and not having to, even when you're, have a driver like an Uber driver, someone who you're paying to drive you somewhere, there's this expectation around social niceties and maintaining a conversation. I think there's also a lot of gendered expectations around, being friendly but not too friendly, and sort of trying to toe that line for your own safety. And to not have to think about all of that was lovely. At the same time, I, want to live in a place where I don't have to get in a car every time I want to go somewhere. I want to have the freedom to be able to walk or roll. I think that, from a climate perspective and a scaling perspective, mass transit, whether that be buses or subways, are going to be the way we need to transport large numbers of people at scale. And so, to sort of envision a future where everyone is in an autonomous vehicle, and the distances we need to travel become further and further because that sort of time penalty of driving becomes less. And also the storage capacity needed to have all those personal vehicles exist on our streets, exist, in parking lots, exist at our homes, even if they're not privately owned, just all the deadheading that happens currently with Uber and Lyft, where they're driving around waiting for passengers. That's sort of not what I would envision as my ideal city. And I am concerned that when we think about that as the solution to mobility for people who can't drive themselves, we're precluding other kinds of land use decisions that ultimately, for me, is more of the kind of the cities that I want to see us building towards, and the kind of cities that I think are gonna have affordable housing, gonna be places where there's green space and lack of pollution and lack of car noise, that make them more livable for everyone.
Thank you for that response. Just as a quick show of hands, how many people have, and for online, I guess you can also do the raise the hand. How many people here have taken an automated vehicle like a Waymo? Okay, I know they are. You see them in Seattle driving around, so maybe they're going to come here at some point. Kunal, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that, because one of the benefits of paratransit is it does generally do door-to-door. And so it can simplify that navigation experience a little bit.
So I actually took a Waymo for the first time last week in San Francisco. it was a very interesting experience for me. I love technology personally. I mean, I think it's a cool thing where I'm able to say I'm not necessarily driving, but I am taking a car by myself. That kind of gives me a lot of agency and freedom. But was I able to take a Waymo end to end? Not yet. So, basically locating the car was a challenge, and then everything was great inside the car. The app was great, accessible, reasonably intuitive, and again getting off and getting to the door, was again a challenge. So it's not right now not necessarily solving the last mile navigation issues that people face.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. Great, Kenny. Do you have thoughts? Automated vehicles.
Yeah, well, that argument Anna was referring to, that it's probably all the above. One of the things I love about going to DC is the metro, that I, can largely get around most of the places I want to go just by hopping on the train. That all hinges on the elevator situation, though. I've not done the automated vehicles. But I know that, putting me with head controls inside a vehicle is very dangerous, because I tear up the walls of my house. I don't think I should be on the road anytime soon in a vehicle I can control. But I like the idea of the open space stuff Anna referred to as well. I live in Sumner, and they seem to be dumping a lot of money into trail infrastructure. And that's one of the things that I love doing. I can get 40 miles in a charge, 50 miles in my chair, and being able to hop on a trail and go from my house in Sumner up to Ording to grab a burger with a friend, that's a pretty cool option. And so having a combination of all that space, I think it would be great, because like recently we had a program up at the UW Othello Commons area, and I just had my niece dropped me off at the Federal Way light rail station, took it up myself, and I got right to the door all at once. And so, you get to see a combination of that. But yeah, there are some logistical challenges too. So,
Great responses and great question. Thank you, Greg. Others? We have one. Oh, we have multiple. Kate, I saw your hand first.
Hi, this is Kate. So I'm kind of curious about, what do you think the future of detecting and reporting situational accessibility constraints for navigation? So I'm thinking about things that might be like construction, where maybe part of a sidewalk is suddenly closed off, or even things like here on campus, sometimes student orgs are hosting events, and an area that is normally free of obstacles becomes very crowded, and other things like that you might not be able to readily identify, that aren't necessarily infrastructure, but could be like a tree falling or something like that.
You know what? Kenny mentioned one too, which was huge in DC. You may not have heard him say this. So DC has fantastic subway. I used to live there, but what they don't have great access to, and is very unreliable, not just their escalators, but their elevators. Mm-hmm. So you can get off at a stop expecting that, you're going to go to your medical provider or your important meeting, and then you realize that the elevator is out. You got to wait for the next train, get to another stop, right? Figure out your way back to your location, right? It becomes very, very challenging. Great additional labor. But yeah, that's a great question. So sort of what to do with these almost ephemeral problems or transient issues that arise dynamically. And maybe your experience with that. I guess we'll go with Kunal first.
Yeah, I think it's a great question, and we do need feedback loops that that take in people's and make it easy for people to report at the first place. So if I have to spend 5 minutes on reporting a barrier, that's going to be hard, and I might do it once, but if I'm motivated, I might do it, but not everyone would do that. So we need tools that are easy to use in that sense, and then I guess the dialogue with the agencies, because if if I'm reporting and it's just somewhere lying there as, as a part of their maintenance queue or whatever, people are not going to be motivated to do it. So, a flowing dialogue between people with lived experience and the agencies and the right tools to support. So hopefully we are building, and it is available for use as well. So, where you could, as a user, report barriers related to sidewalks, but also temporary issues or obstructions, both through our at Tasker Center, both through the mapping app and Access Map, which is a navigation application.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting answer. Like, where does the data live? And it reminds me, in DC for a while, I think somebody had hooked up to their API, Twitter. And so there was like a Twitter DC Metro elevator status feed. Yeah. And it also reminds me that I think officially the Washington Sheriff's Department was using Twitter up until very recently as their like primary channel to communicate with the public. And we don't really have great replacements for these things that are not owned by the tech oligarchs that Ruo was talking about, and then that infrastructure fails or goes away. And but those notifications are so important. Kenny, do you have additional?
Yeah, I think looking at like both Amtrak or air travel, like, you book a flight on Alaska Airlines from point A to point B. Well, you don't recognize that, when you go to the airport, you're going to the Port of Seattle and you're dealing with a completely different entity. And then you're dealing with, Alaska agents getting checked in, but then you're going through TSA, which is another entity. And then you've got third-party vendors that are going to be handling my wheelchair. And so you've got all these different silos, and it's like, yeah, the Port of Seattle has an app, Alaska Airlines has an app, everybody's got an app, and how do you navigate all of those different notifications all within the limitations of my disability and how I use my iPhone? That, as great as voice control is for somebody with a mobility disability like myself, like it also has failings, and it's going to listen to every conversation that's happening in the room. So having a larger future system that would be able to play with all of those apps and consolidate the reporting process, and then also the notification process as well, because that's a big challenge. Like just if your gate changes for a plane, or if there's any sudden changes like that, trying to find the right notifications and the right next move is a real uphill battle.
Yeah,
I think that's a great point, and I also hear different airports or different regions have different policies around how some of these things are handled. So, certain thing might be handled by the Port of Seattle here, but when you land, it might be a different process. Maybe there it's handled by the airline or a totally different entity. So, I guess how much can you negotiate or remember in that sense?
Anna, we'll get to you in 1 second. I wanted to provide another, I think, helpful example. I work closely with a professor in disability studies and public health. His name is Yochai Eisenberg at the University of Illinois, Chicago. He has this map, and it's like a 1 mile area with sidewalks, and they're annotated by all the different constituencies that own those different pieces of sidewalk. So much so, from the county to the city to the state to the federal level to government, other government entities to private ownership, that at any one point people can finger point and say, well, that's not my responsibility.
Ooh, diffusion of
right? So you go whatever 500 meters or 1,000 meters, and you're utilizing all of this public infrastructure that different entities own, and so no one really maintains it. And it's also difficult for anyone to take authority and accountability and responsibility for that. So Anna, do you have any other thoughts about these sort of transient issues that can arise in terms of reporting, where the data should live, and how to deal with those things?
Yeah, I mean, I just want to provide a point of comparison on how we deal with when, say, there's traffic on a highway, and we have literal news helicopters out, circling, reporting what is like a 5 or a 10-minute delay, right, for drivers. And, you think about instead what it means. I was riding the Cedar River Trail last weekend and it was washed out, and I didn't know it until I got to, a fenced off area where the trail had been washed out. And just like, and if we treated our sidewalks and our multi-use trails or our broken elevators with the same degree of urgency that we treat, a traffic delay on a highway, right? Understanding that the time penalty is often way, way more. Or you think about, transit cancellations, right? Like bus delays or ghost buses, right? And I think it has a lot to do, back to political power, of, both the sort of, perhaps it's a smaller number of people that might be impacted by a sidewalk being out, but also just the lack of political power that we have as disabled people, as poor people, as people who are relying on transit, or who are relying on an elevator to access something. It's just not given that level of importance. And I find that particularly aggravating when you think, like, an example of this would be like when the West Seattle Highway Bridge went out during the pandemic, and it added, say, 15, maybe 20 minutes to people's commutes. And 15 or 20 minutes added to a transit rider commute, that happens almost every day when there's bus delays or missing buses, or you have to detour to get to an accessible sidewalk or an elevator. Like that is no time, right? For many of us to navigate, to just have to build in daily into our travel experiences, because we expect those sort of delays with accessing the infrastructure that we need to. So. I don't have a good reporting mechanism, but I just think a lot of it has to do with how much types of mobility are prioritized by the powers that be.
Yeah, I think power is a big theme in the last panel as well. Who has power and how it's earned and maintained. There was a question here, and then I think we'll go back there, and then potentially Greg. We'll see how the queue does. Love the questions. Keep them going. Maybe just introduce yourself as well. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Dai. My question is, how can we work with homeless or unsheltered people with disabilities to improve transportation accessibility for them?
Any thoughts, panelists? Anna, you come to mind as someone who might
Yeah.
have some response. But
Sure. I mean, many of the folks using our transit systems, especially folks in larger cities, are using them as a place of shelter, right? Because it's climate controlled. And yeah, it's a much more comfortable place than being on the street. And I think, there's tension with that. When when a system both needs to be a place of shelter and a place for transportation, and how do you balance the needs of users when they conflict, because those are sometimes competing needs. And I think we need to acknowledge that more than we do right now, and have honest conversations about the decisions we're making as in managing our transit systems, and how we're going to meet everyone's needs, and what especially with bus shelters as well, right? I think that is also part of that. When bus shelters become a place of refuge long term versus a place to wait for a bus to arrive, how do you balance those needs? And so I don't think especially in Seattle, I don't think we're having honest conversations about those tensions. I don't have good solutions, though.
you also mentioned previously in one of your responses about affordability of mass transit. And I think that's also continues to be a significant problem. Some cities during the pandemic, there were some positive sides of the pandemic. I'm an optimist, if you were here before. And one of those was some cities opened their transit systems more to the general public, tried to make them more affordable, even free. But that's obviously hard to scale and maintain over time. Do you, Kunal and Kenny, have any other thoughts? It's certainly a challenging question. Thank you.
Yeah, I don't know if I've got too much to add on that, but like it seems like I don't know if it's a tangential offshoot, but the people that don't have access to the transportation are also not considered as much. It seems like the people that I run into are getting siloed into different facilities and aren't even able to make it out. So it's like they may have homes, but the quality of those homes might not be the best at getting them out as well. So.
Okay. Hi, back there in the headphones. Yep. Yeah.
This is Inquita speaking. I was going to ask the same question, but it was in a different way. Like we talk about power and we talk about like who has power. And I think sometimes individuals who are in our community that have power, they sometimes don't, I guess, think about some of the things that people who are not in that same reality or in that same socioeconomic status is totally different. And like, how do we within the same space, when you talk about like transportation, create that same, like some type of, I guess, normalcy for other people that within that space, when you talk about like, so there are passes that you can get, but at the same time, if you can't even afford the $1.50 for the ride, that's still a barrier. And so not only that, but just again, other things that could be helpful, and how can we rally together to do things that will be helpful within transportation other than just the bus or trails or flights, that we can kind of rally together to help out with some of the things that are for all layers of abilities. I always say that there is, like, I don't say like marginalized, I always say barriers, because people on all levels of economic status have barriers. We just have to figure out which barrier can help both, or we can help each other within the barriers. So yeah. And so one is not greater than the other.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. Mm-hmm. Greg?
Thank you. Two things. One, just to another vector to watch out for is, even when we think regulation, we think government, that would be better than industry. The Weather Service, we have a U.S. Weather Service that would give out weather warnings. And so the guy who created a business selling weather information to investors got himself appointed to be the head of that board, and then got it, so they rewrote the rules so the weather agency now no longer can give out information to the public. It has to give it to companies, who then give it out to the place, but they give it to their investors first so they can change their investments before they alert the public, including things like tornadoes. So it's really scary. So just to watch another vector, even when we think the government's going to watch out. The point I was going to raise, however, though, is I wonder if this problem, this issue, will go away over time. We think of cell phones. We have smartphones now, and you can get all this traffic information off of whether the place is busy, because all your cell phones are giving that information anonymously to Google or Apple or whoever, and then they use that to create these maps. Well, we're getting now augmented reality glasses, which we all think, oh, that's something for the future. But think if your glasses weighed the same as your current glasses, but whenever you went someplace, it would tell you where to go. You never had to wander. I wandered all over the place trying to figure out where this room was today. And found out that you have to go on the elevator, and it's up on the 4th floor, and there's no sign in the lobby. I mean, all that stuff. And when that gets to be that handy, it would work again for all disabilities. But if we're all having these things and they all have cameras in them, and you take all that anonymized data, it would mean that you would have a real-time map of the entire world. If somebody put up a barrier on the sidewalk, within 5 minutes, somebody walking by and just glancing down that street would see that barrier, and it could be identified. So instead of relying on people going around and reporting, could all of these barriers be identified automatically from mass anonymized information the same way our cell phones now tell us what the traffic is doing?
Oh, Greg. You and I share a kinship, I think, which is we are at heart engineers and optimists. And I would love to have asked that question to the last panel. They may have thrown fire at you, which can be either constructive or destructive. Yeah, because, that would require mass surveillance at a level that we've never seen. But yeah, and I have noticed some of us in the room even are wearing the AR glasses. They become so small now that you might not even notice them, right? They are getting to that point that they're very lightweight. So I want to continue to provoke you to ask questions, but I did have a couple bonus ones that are kind of provocative. So maybe we could turn towards one of those. All right, you're at a dinner party, and you're sitting down with someone with power, someone that you could choose to have that's power. So it could be a transit CEO, city planner, CEO of Boeing, CEO of somebody who designs light rail, and you make them use their own system the way that you do. So who would it be, and what would you have them do? And maybe we'll start with Anna.
Great question. This is something that we, with Non-Drivers Alliance, and before that with Disability Rights Washington, have been asking folks, who run our transportation departments, who are elected officials, who work at our transit agencies, right, to ride and use the systems that people who with disabilities who can't or don't drive, use every day. So whether that be trying to navigate a sidewalk at night, wait at a bus stop, take transit, do a ride along on paratransit, right? And especially right now this year, we're really focused on trying to get people who serve on transit boards, who are elected officials. There's 219 of them around our state, who are local elected officials, city and county electeds for the most part, and asking them, have you ridden transit in the system that you supervise as a board member? And when was the last time? And would you like to ride it again with us for a week without driving? And we've had a survey out since February out to these folks. We've got about a third of those 219 folks to respond. And, some ride it, some have ridden it, some have never ridden transit in that system that they are in charge of. And so I encourage them to try that. We hear often, oh, there's no transit where I live. Well, there is transit where you live if you're on the board of the transit agency as an elected official. And so it may not be convenient, but that's a good test. That's a good way to understand what it's like for the people in your community who rely on that service. And we know if it exists, there are people out there using it. And so, and they're your constituents if you're an elected official. And so it's good to know what they're experiencing. So that's my broad challenge to everyone who sits on a transit board in our state, to take the opportunity to, hey, I mean, even once a month, ride somewhere on the system that you are in charge of.
Nice synergy too. We didn't pre-plan that. I didn't realize you were running that initiative. I'd love to hear more about that.
I was like, wow, good question.
Kenny, how about you?
Yeah, as much as I would love to put any elected official into an aisle chair on an airplane where you get strapped in like Hannibal Lecter and dragged down the aisle in front of a bunch of people, I think that'd be a good experience for any of them. But that's a massive machine that won't change anytime soon. But yeah, to Anna's point, I think of like one of my best friends and one of our board members, Ian Mackay, that does advocacy for accessible trails. He has gotten almost every commissioner for the Trails Coalition of Port Angeles to ride the Olympic Discovery Trail in a power wheelchair. And yeah, it's amazing how much that makes changes happen a lot sooner when they start running over tree roots and all sorts of stuff that you can run into in a power wheelchair. That yeah, it definitely gives people a frame of reference. And yeah, but I agree, like paratransit rides I think would probably be the other one that I would really love to have folks recognize. It's like, all right, your 30-minute drive is going to turn into a 4 to 8 hour day. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you have another chair for trails?
No, I do. I use this one. I do have another chair for air travel though, because I'm going to let them break my backup chair so that they can pay for it later. So,
Yeah. Kunal?
Yeah, I guess before I get into my answer, I love the answer on trails because hopefully I've gotten into running. Hopefully I will run longer. But yeah, I do imagine a situation where I can run by myself and do a trail or maybe even a marathon someday. But to the answer to the question on getting somebody to go for dinner, I would say somebody, and of course, what Anna mentioned, what Kenny mentioned, all that. Plus, I would want somebody to navigate, go end to end, door to door, point A to point B, the way the way a lot of the folks navigate. Use use the technology, use whatever apps they would like, use whatever systems, whatever assistance, but yeah, get from point A to point B, and only condition being you're not allowed to drive. That and I don't necessarily mean this as an empathy exercise because that doesn't really work always, but just do it in a way that's comfortable for you, and I think that would reveal a lot of things for folks.
Well, we are almost at time. We have what? Oh, it ends at 4, not at 3:45. Okay, great. We do have more time. Great. There's a question here, and then we'll get you. Thanks.
Hi. Mine's actually a statement, and I'm going to piggyback off of Anna with having the people that are on the boards run it. They should also have to do the paperwork in order to get onto a paratransit or be able to get those other assistants out there, because I do in-home care, and my clients are having a heck of a time and trying to get those done, because you have a paper sack about that big. It's got to go to the doctor, then it's got to go to a different doctor, and then it's got to go to their portion, and then they may or may not accept it because it's not filled out right, and then it goes back. But if you're waiting to get from Thurston County up to Seattle, it's an ordeal, and it takes over 6 months. To me, that's not acceptable. So that's a huge hurdle on top of, once you get through that paperwork, then you get, okay, well, now I got to have Thurston County talk to Pierce County, then talk to King County to get transportation up there. It's a huge thing. And each county runs their transit different. And that makes it worse. There should be some kind of, I don't know, at least the west side saying, hey, this is what we're going to do for all of these counties that are interlinked, especially when, if you have specialty doctors, they're all in Seattle. But you got all these other counties that have to come up here, but if you're disabled, you can't do that.
In HCI, we try to teach about empathy design, which is really challenging. So we're kind of talking a little bit about empathy and understanding other types of experience that might be different from our own. And there's a big difference between trying and living. So for example, you might talk to the CEO of the Metro in DC, and they might offer a counter to say, well, our elevators are 90% reliable, which sounds pretty good. But if you think about it, and you're a commuter, and you rely on that for your daily commute to work or other services, how many times are you going to ride it in a week? 10 times. So what's 90% reliable mean in that case? 1 out of 10. But guess what? You don't know which of the 10. And it just reminds me, Anna, you've shared some stories where you're at a bus stop and you're just waiting, and of course it's Seattle, and it's night. It's night, and it's raining. Where is it? and maybe one bus away is malfunctioning or their transmitters are malfunctioning, right? And it just doesn't come. And so it can have huge consequences. So if you have that CEO go, of course, they're going to have a refined experience, highly curated, right? And instead, what you need them to do is just live it, which is so hard. And that's why we need to have people with different types of perspectives and lived experience on these advisory boards, like you are on Alaska Airlines and for Amtrak and so on. Okay, there was a question back there.
So when it comes to, this is Inquita speaking, when it comes to next month and the World Cup, has anyone like from our community have been able to start galvanizing? I would love to, because I've been trying to get people from our community to galvanize, because it's going to be crowded, and then there will be people that are here who from other countries or around the world who may have a disability. So I think that this is our chance to actually be the actual hospitable space of disabilities and kind of do something for them. So if anyone is like, if you guys have thought about something, please let me know. I would love to join you and collaborate, but I'm actually trying to do some things. And if you want to join me and collaborate on that would be great.
I love that. And just, you know what? Zuckerberg's yacht has just arrived in time for the World Cup. So maybe we could all hop on that thing and take it around. Did you see that?
In Lake Union?
I think so, right? One of the largest yachts.
Yeah, that thing was
No, to the spirit of your question, I think that's so important. I don't know initiatives. Does anyone on the panel know of anything to help with the World Cup? Because you also have, beyond disability, you might have language differences, which you encountered, for example, in France could be an inhibitor. Kunal, what were you going to say?
We are part of this regional transit accessibility network that are mostly comprised of agencies and then some neutral people like us. We've published a kind of guide, a toolkit for people to kind of look at different transit options and different navigation applications, what people they help or what kinds of barriers they kind of, help you with or help you mitigate, what services are available, the kinds of services, because, it can be confusing, things like Sound Transit in King County and paratransit and different counties involved, so for example, Sound Transit stations have this app called Good Maps that is primarily useful for people who are blind or low vision. Somebody else has something that's primarily useful for people who are deaf. So essentially, this toolkit gives you, a good place to start as to what, what is available around World Cup.
Yeah, I wonder what's listed on the Seattle World Cup. Yeah, no, I think that's great. Okay, we'll go back there. Just a reminder to introduce yourself, too. Thanks for being here.
Hi, I'm Pete Denman. I've been in a wheelchair now 3 years before the ADA, so I know what it's like before and what the ADA ramped into and what it is right now, which is nothing like what it was when it first started. But I wanted to kind of give a perspective about some of the travel I've done, and I've done a lot of travel, a lot of international travel. And I always think back when I think about the new cars that are coming out, and then ways that we'll be able to transport ourselves and go between places and whatnot. And I think of my time when I've been in London, and almost every time I go to London, I have this warm, fuzzy feeling because I know that every single taxi in London is handicap accessible. And when I go to London, I can go anywhere and have dinner. I can go and then leave there and go anywhere and have drinks and go from there and go anywhere and do whatever else I want to do, and then still make it back to where I need to go in the same amount of time anybody else can do it.
So those like black cabs in London, or
every black cab in London is a wheelchair, because they made those things for hi-hats back when, and so now they just put a ramp on the floor and they open the door and you roll right in. And all the black cabs, and if they're not a black cab, they use Mercedes vans with ramps, and you can go right into them. So the city itself isn't necessarily all accessible, but I've felt more free in that city than I have ever felt. anywhere else. So I just wanted to add that as a positive thing because I had plenty of bad experiences. Thank you.
Yeah. That's like Anna's quote that I wrote down, which is, it's not exactly it, but frequency is freedom. So it's sort of like you don't have to wait. You're not waiting for paratransit. You can flag a cab. In the meantime, do you want to ask your question? I will give you my microphone. Introduce yourself.
How's it going? Thanks for being here today. My name's Dukes. I work in communications at human-computer interaction design here. I was just wondering from a local, regional standpoint, King and Sound Transit, what do you think, how are the notifications for you when things do go awry for you? I just think of it specifically when it comes to things outside of just hearing in the metro stations, like alert, like there's going to be a bus, like we're shutting down from King to, or from Federal Way to this stop, and there will be a bus there. How much of that do you get ahead of time? Do you feel like the notifications come in from your end, or say when like bus stops just shut down? I for one, like there's a bus stop near me where it's shutting down for the summer and we need to move up, but it's not like that notification is above my head. I'm 6'3", and it's not in Braille for our friend here. So I'm just wondering from your standpoint, how the communication and notifications are when things do get disrupted.
Thank you, Dukes. Kenny?
Yeah, I just riding the light rail by myself last month on the way up to UW Othello. I hopped on and I'm like, this is gonna be fantastic. And then at one point, there was a notification came over the intercom that said, there's a long delay, and they said it could be up to 45 minutes. And I had no other kind of plan, so I was kind of stuck in the water there, for lack of a better term. And I waited it out, and thankfully it didn't last as long. But I know one of our other members hopped off, caught a bus, and it was a big impact. So it's the way planning,
Pop alerts wouldn't, like, there are no pop alerts for that for you to.
There were, I believe, on the Transit app, the Transit Go app, we did see that, but it was hard to navigate exactly what the issue was, how long it was going to be, that kind of thing. So,
I guess from my perspective, I am, in most cases, and it does take cognitive effort, but maybe follow the notifications. But then if I'm not prepared, I'm already on the trip, it's hard to make that shift. What is a backup, or what is the next resort if you are expected to take a bus instead of the train for 2 stops and then hop onto the train again? Is there some assistance that's available, or am I left to fend for myself, to make that change? Because that essentially wasn't a part of, my trip or my navigation strategy per se. So how does that, how is that being communicated? Or, is the expectation that am I supposed to check maybe before I head out each day? Or and I'm not a frequent transit user, so maybe there are people who use it every day and they are more familiar, they are sort of experts in maybe navigating that. But this is something that I wonder about in terms of notifications.
There's another side of this I'm thinking about, where we're all kind of in this technological bubble, which is a form of privilege too, because I was talking to Kenny too. He's like very technologically savvy. I know Kunal is working in the Taskar Center, and then Anna, and it's the people who don't have access to the technology or don't know how to use it too, and they're not going to get the same information flow or have the same ability to dynamically deal with these problems. Like when you went to New York, it was New York on the United, and then there was all this dynamic action that had to take place, and then you were also like sequestered for 6 hours somewhere, and you had to figure out your way to get from X and right, and it just A lot of times we're relying on technology for that. But if you don't have that access or even pervasive internet, or you can't afford it, right, it becomes much more problematic. Oh, now we're getting the timeout. Well, thank you so much, panelists. Anna, thank you, even though you can't hear me. I'm thanking you into the void. And Kenny and Kunal, thank you for sharing your expertise and your experiences with us. Thank you all for your questions. But don't go, because the show's not over, right? We have an amazing poster session out there with lots of students and great projects to share with you all. Okay, so thank you for your time and attention. I hope to get to meet you all out there as well. So thank you.